Hey, we had 3 days of protests. Thanksgiving at Jay Inslee's personal residence on Bainbridge Island made headlines locally from the biased media, and have a few other local news and national news things about jobs and the current economic status, and as well as some upcoming events to talk about. Stay tuned. Hey, what's going on? You're taking a look right now at my YouTube channel, youtube.com/lifeisdriving, and you can see here the third day, Saturday, called Black Saturday, at Jay Inslee's house, where a bunch of patriots gathered to protest the current economic lockdown restrictions that are unfairly targeting small businesses, in my opinion, and the opinion of many others. Jay Inslee is intentionally punishing and trying to force the closure of small businesses in Washington state, and he is lining the pockets of his wealthy corporate donors that donated to his presidential and gubernatorial campaigns here in Washington state, and those people are benefiting from Jay Inslee's current policies. Got some great video here, an hour-long stream that we did of this event where we met up at Jay Inslee's house and then marched around Bainbridge Island with loudspeakers and protested the situation. Here is some headlines that were made from Lynn's Wynn, the organizer of the event, and also Mossy Rock, Washington. I don't know if you've seen this. Mossy Rock passes an ordinance allowing businesses to stay open. So that's great news. I hope that more cities and counties will start to pass ordinances to defy Jay Inslee's tyrannical lockdown measures, because we all know that these are punishing small businesses. We'll get into that in a little more detail here. I don't know if you heard, I talked about this a couple streams ago. There's a Washington restaurant in the Tri-Cities area that is staying open in violation of Jay Inslee's most recent lockdown restrictions, and they're calling it a peaceful protest. Well, one of the things I talked about was that Jay Inslee is going to be threatening the liquor board, the liquor licenses, and he'll use the liquor control board, to implement any punishment that he deems fit, like fines and pulling their liquor license. And that's happened. And the Tri-Cities liquor agent's home was targeted by Patriot Prayer activists for a rally protest, and that was on November 23rd. They went there last Sunday, and I think they were there again today as well. Joey Gibson leading the charge on there. But it's funny, the Tri-Cities Herald, which several people on Reopen Washington have commented and said this is just a liberal rag and a disgrace for the Tri-Cities, but you can see this headline: "Keep your COVID protests and your bullying away from Tri-City homes." Editorial. And I read this article, and I think it's ironic considering all the businesses that have closed in Seattle, and especially in the Seattle area. You can see here this tweet from Dan Price. I've shared this before. Dan Price owns a payment processing company here in Seattle. He does payment processing for mainly small businesses, and he says here, just this year, as a result of the economic lockdowns from the pandemic response by Jay Inslee, Amazon profit up 100%, Walmart profit up 80%, Target profit up 80%, Lowe's profit up 74%, Microsoft, Facebook, Apple, Google, stock at record high. Small businesses, 21% closed. Revenue for the rest down 30%. They're going to go extinct in lockdown without help. And we have here from King 5, published on November 16th, 140 downtown Seattle businesses have permanently closed since the pandemic. And it mentions this Yelp study that says, according to a study by Yelp, there were 2,685 business closures in the Seattle metropolitan area. So that's a pretty big area. That's not just downtown Seattle. Down from 4,500 businesses marked closed in April. By July 10th, the total number of closures had fallen to 2,485, with 52% representing permanent closures. However, by the end of August, the total rose again to 3,061 closures. And you know that with Jay Inslee's current restrictions, restaurants cannot pay their rent. They can't pay the leases, let alone the salaries and all the other things, that come along with running a small business. But they cannot pay to run their operation. And Jay Inslee has extended an eviction moratorium here, and I think that it also applies to businesses as well. But not only does that tack on the costs of any lease or mortgages that are not paid, it tacks them on to the end of the term. But also, you got to think about the landlords, the people that own those businesses and the places, the houses and housing that's being rented. Those landlords are not getting paid, and there's a whole group of those landlords that are suing Jay Inslee because of his current eviction moratoriums and how they are bankrupting landlords. And I can only wonder what's going to happen when those people go under. But here's this Yelp study, and it shows that permanent closures, 97,966 businesses. Those are businesses nationwide. Almost 100,000 businesses have closed permanently since this lockdown. And you can see, scroll down here to restaurants are the most impacted. They're especially with Jay Inslee's current restrictions, where you cannot dine in a restaurant, you can't be inside of a restaurant, even though 25% capacity in a grocery store or a Best Buy or a Walmart, that far exceeds the number of people that could be in your local restaurant at any one time. It's totally ridiculous, totally biased. And you can see here total closures by metro area. Seattle is only 8th down from the top or something like that, and Washington is 6th in line for permanent closures and temporary closures by state. So you have to wonder, when you think about this Tri-City Herald headline, "Keep your COVID protests and bullying away from Tri-City homes." I think these restaurants feel a little bullied. I think that the restaurant owners feel just a little bit bullied by Jay Inslee's restrictions. They spend a lot of money trying to keeping these places up to code, making sure they're sanitized, and then they get shut down in the busiest season of the year, right in front of right before the holidays. And I'll bet you that there is a lot of Christmas budgets that are ruined as a result of Jay Inslee's economic punishment for small businesses. That's really what it looks like to me. I saw this report from the Foundation for Economic Education. Suicide claimed more lives in October than 10 months of COVID-19 in Japan, report shows. And I've heard a lot of people talk about this. I've read some articles about it. There was a lady at day 2 of the shutdown, the protests at Jay Inslee's house in Bainbridge Island. There was a lady specifically talking about her daughter, and there was someone else talking about a suicide that had happened from depression. But depression is affecting a lot of people. It's affecting many, many of us are affected by depression, not only just from these lockdowns, but already we have depression, one of the highest rates for depression in the country, and that's because of Seattle's weather. It's always doom and gloom. It's always cloudy. It's always overcast. We get a few months of shiny, bright weather in the summer, but for the most part, we always have overcast, cloudy skies. And I, for one, I take a vitamin D supplement. I started taking one several years ago after I noticed in my own personality some changes that would happen every single year at the same time. And I realized that I was being affected by just the lack of sunlight and things like that. So I come from Utah, a very sunny area. That's where I grew up. And I think I need the sun. I think we all do. And I think that Jay Inslee's restrictions and shutting people down and the forced isolation and making everybody wear masks and it just dividing everybody has really affected a lot of people, and depression has gone off the charts. And we know that there's a lot of students. I was during my campaign for state representative this year, I was able to participate in a Zoom meeting with the ARC of Snohomish County, where They deal with children with developmental disabilities, and one of the things they rely on is being able to go to school and socialize with their peers, and that's really the only time they get to socialize with a lot of kids their own age, and that's been totally restricted, totally cut off, where these kids are now isolated at home. And many children, they get the majority of their nutrition from the school systems, and they get their only socialization from being at school, and that's been totally cut off. And so it's really sad, and you have to wonder, and I know that a lot of these studies are just not being done. There's just a lot of stuff that's just not being talked about, and unless you're in specific circles or you hunt out specific articles and studies, it's not being reported by a lot of major media. Another thing that I wanted to talk about was these media reporters that call Joey Gibson's protest in front of the Liquor Control Board person's house in the Tri-Cities because they're threatening to pull the license. I think they issued a fine to that restaurant that stayed open, and they're threatening to pull the license, and they call it bullying here. But meanwhile, the liberal media, they lied about the Chop Chaz zone. They lied about it here in Seattle. They said it wasn't a dangerous area. It wasn't something to be scared of. But, and then after these kind of reports from places like CNN, we saw multiple deaths in the Chop Chaz zone. CNN lied in this article specifically on this video. I have ReopenWA Radio 4. I have this video, and I have this little clip from Brian Stelter talking about Fox News using an image of a guy with a gun, and they say, oh, they've taken this image and photoshopped him in to a report of a guy. They photoshopped this guy with an assault rifle into a piece of a news report where there was like a flaming car or something, and they say that's irresponsible. That's not happening, and they just want to make the case that Fox News lied. Meanwhile, I had personally driven around the Chop Chaz zone with my camera rolling, and I got up close video of this guy right here in the center of this, right next to this orange barricade. There's a guy wearing a vest, and he's got a hat on, and he has a green mask, but he's carrying an assault rifle. That's the guy in the Fox News article, and CNN openly lies about it and says that's not happening. There's no armed guards there, and we all know that actually was the case. And we saw stuff from CNN where CNN mocked for calling Kenosha riots fiery but mostly peaceful protests. And you can see this car dealership. There was many car dealerships torched that in Kenosha during the riots that happened there before they got shut down. And I wonder if those businesses feel just a little bit bullied by that movement, and just a little bit bullied by the news agencies that call these places mostly peaceful protests. You can see this chyron here on the CNN article. It says, fiery but mostly peaceful protests after police shooting. Then you have another one. You have this guy right here standing in front of a burning building, and MSNBC reporter, I just want to be clear how I characterize this. This is mostly a protest. It's not, generally speaking, unruly. And the guy is literally standing in front of a burning building.
I want to be clear in how I characterize this. This is mostly a protest. It is not
unbelievable.
Not generally speaking unruly.
It just blows me away that these guys, the liberal media, can call all summer long, they call these mostly peaceful protests. They downplay the violence and destruction. And then when the Liquor Control Board threatens to pull the license from a business that is staying open to defy Jay Inslee's current unfair lockdown restrictions that unfairly target small businesses, and you have one restaurant that's ballsy enough to stay open in defiance of Jay Inslee, and the liberal media in the Tri-Cities says, keep your bullying away from Tri-Cities homes. They don't want us showing up at people's houses. They don't want us showing up anywhere. They don't want us showing up at Jay Inslee's house in Bainbridge Island. It's okay if you riot in the streets. They'd probably be perfectly fine with it if we showed up to Jay Inslee's house. If Joey Gibson showed up to this house in the Tri-Cities, the Liquor Control Board officer, if he showed up to his house, ate his Thanksgiving turkey, smashed his windows, and burned his house down, maybe the Tri-City Herald would call this a mostly peaceful protest. But Joey Gibson shows up with a megaphone to protest the threats of the Liquor Control Board against this restaurant in the Tri-Cities that stayed open in defiance of Jay Inslee, and they say, keep your bullying away from Tri-Cities homes. I mean, this is just ridiculous. Unbelievable bias from these news outlets. Just blows me away. We saw Governor Kate Brown encouraging residents to call the police on neighbors for violating COVID rules. So it's okay in 150 days or something in Portland of riots and protesting and burning things down and defunding the police. Everybody, and I think they've actually largely defunded the police. But then she flips and asks people to call the police if you see people violating the COVID rules and having people over for Thanksgiving. She had a limit of 6 people. Limiting in-home gatherings to a maximum of 6 people from no more than 2 different households. So if you see somebody breaking those rules, by all means call the police. But don't show up to anybody's house and protest on the other side, because if you disagree with the mainstream media or the liberal media narrative, then that's bullying. That's bullying there. That's not what I want to talk about. I saw this one today. It was posted yesterday from the Foundation for Economic Education, how big government stacked the deck against small businesses. And it says, most of us wouldn't list 2020 as our best year, but you know who would? Amazon, Walmart, Google, Apple, and a whole host of other big corporations who have seen their sales and stock prices soar amidst the pandemic. Small businesses have been pummeled by excessive and insane governmental lockdowns of the economy. Experts warn that one third of small businesses could ultimately shut down for good. And hundreds of thousands have already done just that. So that Yelp article that had that study that showed 97,000, that was back in like September. So it's probably surpassed the 100,000 mark easily by now. But you know, what's going to happen is when the majority of these businesses, or 1/3 of the small businesses in Washington, are closed, and we have all these people that used to work for these businesses are on unemployment, Jay Inslee's first thing is going to be to raise taxes. They're already talking about raising taxes. One of the things that kept coming up in the campaign when I was running for office here was that I was not open to new sources of revenue. You know, they create the problem, and then they have this reaction, and they want to have the solution, which is more taxes to fix the problem that they created. They don't want to unleash the economy. They want everybody to go on unemployment, to become wards of the state, and then they want to raise taxes. And the companies that can absorb that raise in the taxes are these gigantic companies, the same companies that donated heavily to Jay Inslee's campaigns for president and for governor. So Jay Inslee's campaign donors are directly benefiting from his restrictions, and everybody else is being punished by his restrictions. And it says right here that 1/3 of small businesses could ultimately close as a result of these pandemic lockdowns. Even though the World Health Organization says lockdowns don't work and we shouldn't have lockdowns, they're still going full steam ahead, doubling down and doing more restrictions and more lockdowns. And you know that what's going to come down the pike is Jay Inslee's going to institute, the Democrats in Washington state are going to do an end run around the Constitution here, and they're going to implement an income tax here in Washington state. They're talking about a capital gains tax, which I talked about in previous streams, that one of the reasons that there was a bunch of appointments in my district was because one of the guys was censured and stepped down for voting against a capital gains tax. Guy Palumbo was against the capital gains tax, and he ended up getting disciplined by the Democrats for that, and he ended up leaving the state Senate. There was a bunch of appointments that followed that, and that was one of the reasons I stepped into the race. But here's another article on Tennyson Street in Denver. Mom and pop shops are dying amid COVID-19. And the article talks about how local residents in the area are worried that with all the local mom and pop shops closing, it's going to only expedite the gentrification of the area, meaning that they're going to tear down all these old businesses and or come in and remodel them, and you're going to have big corporations and Chick-fil-A's and Five Guys burgers and that kind of thing coming in and taking over the area where it used to be completely run and a small business district with mom and pop shops. And so that's going away. As we see with these other articles, 1/3 of small businesses, mom and pop shops, will be going away if these pandemic restrictions continue. I saw this great meme shared by Ari Hoffman today, and it says, Grandpa, if socialism has two country boys sitting on I think that's I can't remember his name. Anyway, it says, Grandpa, if socialism doesn't work, then why do people support it? Because they don't work either, son. That's so true. I attended the local 1st Legislative District Democrat meeting. I checked into their local meeting that they had this year during the election, and first thing that surprised me was that they had 4 or 5 times the amount of people in their meetings, just volunteers on the ground doing ground level things. But there were so many people that identified personally as communists and anarcho-communists and socialists, and they all, so many of those people identify as that, and they were vocal about it, and they're in there supporting the Democrat Party at the local ground level, getting people involved. So they had way more activists involved at the ground level, just getting out the vote. But so many of those people are communists and socialists. They don't want to work. They don't want to be responsible for bringing in an income. They don't want to support their families by actually working. They want to be wards of the state, and they want to have government income. And so they're actively fighting against our very way of life here. They're trying to destroy that kind of stuff. I just find it really funny, that the small businesses they're in trouble. They are in real trouble here in Washington State, and the small business owners, they feel bullied. They feel under attack. They feel what's going on. And then you have these liberal rags like the Tri-Cities Herald saying, keep your bullying away. It's okay if you go out and protest for Black Lives Matter, and if you protest, for against Donald Trump, or if you go out and burn things down and you protest against the police and you want to defund the police and you want to burn buildings down and do looting and rioting, they're gonna cover for you. They're gonna call you a mostly peaceful protester, and they're gonna downplay any violence. So they say, oh, if the protest went from 12 noon to midnight, and then from midnight to 2 a.m. there was burning and looting and rioting, well, then those 12 hours of peaceful protesting, that was a mostly peaceful protest. And so they're going to cover for you. But if you step up to go and defend a local business, and you go and protest against these restrictions, or if you protest against the Liquor Control Board threatening to take away the liquor license of a local business and issuing these crazy fines after they've been shut down for months, and then they get $19,000 fines for having people in your gym or something like that. If you go and protest those, they're gonna sit down and shut up, slave, because they just want you to sit down and take it. They don't want you to speak out. They don't want you to stand up for yourself, or stand up for your own business, or stand up for your friend's business, or stand up for anybody else's business. They want you to just sit down, shut up, and become a ward of the state. But if you protest on the other side, they're going to cover for you. So really obvious bias coming from these liberal news outlets. I found that really amazing. But there is another event coming up next week at Jay Inslee's house on the 5th. And there is going to be more people from, I think, Joey Gibson's group, possibly. I saw it on the patriotcalendar.com. There is going to be another protest at Jay Inslee's house on Bainbridge Island next week, December 5th. And then on December 12th, there is the 10 million to Washington. They're trying to get another gigantic group, like we saw the Million Mega March a couple weeks ago. I think it was on November 14th in Washington, D.C., and they're trying to do a repeat of that on the 12th, December 12th. So if you've got the means, if you've got the If you can do that, if you can get out, if you're mobile and you can take some time off and fly out to DC or drive out to DC, I would highly recommend it. We definitely need to get people out. We need to get boots on the ground. We need to get our voices heard. We need to get people out in big numbers to not only to Jay Inslee's house on Bainbridge Island next week on December 5th. We need to get people to DC to make our voices heard. We need to have people show up. And I know that the majority of conservatives and Republicans are people that are, have their own jobs. They have their own businesses. They're mainly independent, and they just don't want the government to be infringing on their lives. They just want to be left alone. And I totally get that. That's me. That defines my own life. I just want the government out of my life. But we're at the point now where we have to stand up. And so we need people to show up to these events. We need people that are going to get out and make our voices heard. Because if we don't get out there and make our voices heard, then we're not going to be able to speak out. We're not going to be able to speak up and have a voice. So I just wanted to share that, and I think I'll pull this up really quick. The next event, I don't have it posted. Oh, here we go. Events. Duh. It's going to be up to all of us. If we're going to reopen Washington State, reopen our economy in full, then we need people to show up. And here is the peaceful protest of Tyrant Inslee's lockdown of free people. This is his address on Bainbridge Island. This is next Saturday, December 5th at 12 p.m. If you're going to get out there, if you're coming from this side, from the Seattle side of the water, I would recommend getting on the ferry at an hour in advance. So take the 11 o'clock or the 11:30 at the latest ferry, maybe the 10:55 ferry, and get out there so you can be there on time. We need people to show up in numbers. And if you've got the ability, if you can take the time off of work and you've got the means, please get out to Washington, D.C. for the December 12th 10 million March on Washington. Hopefully we'll see some more news coverage of this, and we need everybody to get out and create their own event. Share these events on your page, but also if you've got a page or if you've got a group, create an event within your group. Just copy the details from this event. You can actually go click on these little three dots right here, and you can duplicate event. You can do that on this one as well, I believe. This one does not allow you to duplicate the event, but you can just easily copy and paste the details here. Create your own event on your own page, on your own Facebook page, on your own page, whether you're on some off Facebook group or whatever. Get out there, make an event, invite people. If everybody shows up and brings one person, we'll have far greater numbers and make a bigger impact. And that's really what it's going to take to resist these tyrannical lockdowns. People are suffering right now. Our small businesses, which are the backbone of our economy, are suffering. They are being bullied by Jay Inslee, and he is directly lining the pockets of his wealthy corporate donors, and we all see it. It's happening right before our eyes. And if we want to preserve our way of life, we need people to show up. So thanks for tuning in. That's all I've got for today, and I'm going to go ahead and close this out. But please subscribe and please like the page, facebook.com/ReopenWA. That's Reopen Washington, shortened to WA. So ReopenWA, facebook.com/ReopenWA. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/LifeIsDriving. And if you're not on Gab, you need to get on Gab.com so that you still have a voice when Facebook decides to censor you. Thanks for tuning in.